The following broadcast is brought to you by Public House Media.
This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Completely Serious, where we talk about sports and have fun with great guests. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Completely Serious. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
has saved the USA's life in this World Cup. Paul, the runner, loose ball, it's good. Gonzaga, the slipper still fits.
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag, it gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it. He's in. Patriots win the Super Bowl. Brady has his fifth.
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness. I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
Welcome inside the cheap seats here on the Public House Media Network. John Lauder with you, and finally back with me is Christian Heimall, home safe from his trip down south across the border over the so-called wall that's going to be built. I don't know how tall that's going to be, but Christian is back with me after a solo show last week. Christian, how's the trip?
It was good. You know, it was nice to see some family, nice to get a little bit much-needed vacation, but I'm certainly happy to be back and talking sports again. I was not happy when all of a sudden I connected to Wi-Fi and realized that my entire bracket was disintegrated in one weekend. But, you know, that's like everybody else apparently, so I can't be too upset.
So let's get right into it. We're going to break down the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. Obviously, so many incredible stories, but starting in the South region, the biggest one, of course, was Loyola-Chicago getting to the Final Four. Just an incredible story. The 4th, 11th seed to make it to the Final Four following LSU, George Mason, and VCU. And the 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th seeds make it into the Sweet 16 in the South region. And obviously, for both of us, Christian, once Virginia lost, it was kind of a lost cause, but great story nonetheless as the Ramblers get themselves to San Antonio.
A 5, a 7, a 9, 11 in the Sweet 16, and 11 goes to the Final Four, and that's not even the weirdest part about the whole region. It's the fact that it's the first time ever a number 1 seed goes down to a 16, and it's the number 1 overall seed. It's the number 1 team in the country. It's the New England Patriots losing to Wofford. It's the most ridiculous thing possible, and I mean, when you look at what Loyola-Chicago did here, I mean, like you and I said this when the brackets came out. We said the South region had the best chance for Cinderella because of Loyola-Chicago. Whether it be their matchup, we had even said you and I both picked them to beat Miami without Bruce Bowen Jr. We both liked their matchup against Tennessee, and then who knew once that gets past, it's a crapshoot. You know, I mean, Kentucky as a 5 seed would have been kind of an upset in this round. I mean, we weren't even sold on Cincinnati, so the fact that Nevada got to the Elite Eight or to the Sweet 16, wasn't that surprising either. So, you know, I mean, this tournament and this region specifically kind of underscored what March Madness is all about, and give credit to the Ramblers. I mean, 3 one-possession wins, buzzer beaters, and then an absolute impressive and dominating performance over Kansas State.
Yeah, and obviously Porter Moser and his staff, a tremendous job, balanced team. They make very few mistakes, disciplined on defense, great teamwork on offense, led by Clayton Custer at the point. And nothing should be taken away from Kansas State. Tremendous run, and no seniors in the regular rotation, so they're going to be right back. Would have loved to have seen them at full strength. Not having Dean Wade really hurt them, especially in this game. I feel like Wade could have done some nice things because Loyola-Chicago, they are basically all guards, other than Krutwig or whatever in the middle. So I think that Wade could have had an impact in this game, but of course he couldn't play, so that made a huge difference for Kansas State. But Bruce Weber's done a nice job, and I think it's ironic in two ways. Illinois has to watch another team from the state make it to the Final Four against their former coach, who they unceremoniously dumped after getting to the national championship game, and now he is taking Kansas State to the Elite Eight. So basically, if you're an Illinois fan, you should be weeping right now. That's pretty much where we're at.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, not only that, but John, I live in the Midwest now, and I don't think 40% of people who live in the Midwest know where Loyola-Chicago is. I mean, so
people that go to the school don't know where it is.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, when you talk about true Cinderella, I mean, yeah, kind of, I guess. I mean, but the other part, I kind of look at it and I go, you know what? These guys had to win their conference tournament. They had to win the Missouri Valley to get in. They were an automatic qualifier. Meanwhile, you mentioned the other 3 11 seeds to make the Final Four: LSU in '86, George Mason in '06, and then VCU in 2011. The George Mason and VCU teams, you and I both know very well from going to a school within their conference in Hofstra in the CAA. So, and all 3 of those teams were at-large bids. So the Ramblers earned their way into the tournament. You can debate whether or not George Mason or VCU or LSU earned their way into the tournament, but I've heard some people talk about this as the greatest Cinderella story of all time, and I'm going, I mean, if you remember the '86 LSU Tigers, they were a team that had literally their entire front line sidelined at the beginning of the year, but this, don't take anything away from the Ramblers. They've done an incredible job, and just really impressive to see what they've done.
Yeah, but and I also think in the NCAA tournament, teams like Villanova in the '80s, North Carolina State, yes, they weren't mid-majors per se, but those were incredible upsets and incredible runs that should not be taken away. But the other 2 teams in this region that made it to the Sweet 16, Nevada and Kentucky, they certainly shouldn't hold their heads down either. The Wolfpack were a really good story, Eric Musselman's team. And the Wildcats, they had the youngest team John Calipari's ever had. I mean, he was changing diapers at halftime for this team. And yes, once all of the top 4 seeds were eliminated, it did look like it was Kentucky's to lose.
Right.
But
they did.
Player Washington, they did, because Washington missed about 75 free throws because they kept fouling him and he couldn't make anything. But look, Kentucky's going to be back. We all know that. Right. Not sure about Nevada. They have a lot of transfers, but both of those teams, I think, should be proud of their seasons.
This may have been the best coaching job John Calipari's done, and that says a lot considering of the talent that he's had. What he did from where they were in December to where they got to, really, really impressive.
Very true. Very true. Continuing to break down the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight here inside the Cheap Seats, John Lauder and Christian Heimall with you. A reminder that we, of course, are part of the Public House Media Network. You should go to thephmedia.com, check out all the great shows there. And we have a store now, Christian. Store. Now, I am very disappointed. Couple of things. No T-shirts with our faces on them. That's a huge problem. Yet. Secondly, there's a show called sipping the Java, drinking the coffee,
right? Yep.
With Keith and Katie, and they don't have a coffee mug. I mean, that's
a good point.
That's ridiculous.
That's a good point. You know what? That's a very good point. Although there is one for the cheap seats, though. There's a coffee mug for us, so that's always nice.
Well, and that's nice. That way we can pour hot coffee on ourselves every time we look at our brackets. But anyway, make sure you like our Facebook page and also the daily poll question. I mean, it's easy, really. Would you prefer to have tickets to the Final Four or the World Series? Christian and I will debate and yell at each other later because we talked about it before the show, and we definitely have differing opinions, I think. But let's move on to the East region. Villanova's been the best team. Not surprisingly, they are in the Final Four. They're the team to beat. They're the team I should have picked to win the whole thing. I did have them in the championship game, though, so some props. But Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Pascal, Booth, DiVincenzo, you know the names if you know anything about college basketball, and another great run for Jay Wright as they are 2 games away from their second national championship in 3 seasons.
Yeah, and they're not just beating teams, John. They're destroying teams.
Yeah, they've killed everybody.
Obviously beat Radford 87-61, 23-point win over Alabama. And then a West Virginia team that has, for the last 3 years, been known as Press Virginia because of how many turnovers they create and how little they allow teams to score. They put up 90 on probably the best defensive team in the last 5 years.
They scored more against West Virginia than Radford.
Yeah, exactly. And that says something. That says something. They scored more against West Virginia than they did against Radford. And then, of course, an absolutely, a demolition of sorts, even though it was only 12 points of Texas Tech, and don't take anything away from them. But, I mean, this is a Villanova squad that I have been kind of down on over the last couple of months, and clearly I was wrong about them. I don't like their how much they rely on the three, because the 3-point line is the greatest equalizer in sports. If you're hitting it, great. If you're not, you're terrible. As we saw them against Providence, we saw them against St. John's earlier this year. But to the same credit, Jay Wright has done a great job coaching these guys. Jalen Brunson and his leadership. I kind of questioned him in the middle of the year because I wasn't sure how much he had a chip on his shoulder, and he certainly played like it here over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, this team is really, really deep. They're tremendous on defense. They're fast-paced on offense. You mentioned the threes, but also really good at getting out in transition. If you turn the ball over, they're going to make you pay. Really good at points off turnovers. Not a big team, but they spread you out. And, guys like Spellman down low have really had a big factor as well. But, we can't forget about what Texas Tech has done. Their first ever Elite Eight, which amazed me. I did not realize that at first. Their first Elite Eight, tremendous second season under Chris Beard. Now, they couldn't take advantage of Villanova not playing at their best. I mean, Nova definitely didn't have their best game. I mean, 71 points for them really isn't that impressive, but Texas Tech only had 59. Keenan Evans obviously will be a huge loss, and Zaire Smith, just on that dunk alone, may go to the NBA. But Chris Beard in his second season, we talked about this earlier before the show started. He very well could be Coach of the Year. There's a bunch of different options.
He should be. I mean,
He should be.
Give credit to Matt Painter at Purdue. Give credit to Tony Bennett at Virginia. What Calipari did at Kentucky, sure. I mean, you can even go as far down the line. I mean, Jay Wright's going to get some consideration for it, obviously, as well. I mean, but in my opinion, Chris Holtman, at Ohio State, should definitely be in consideration for that as well. But what Chris Beard has done in 2 years at Texas Tech, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-doubter that this guy is the Coach of the Year.
He's been tremendous. And you mentioned Matt Painter. Purdue, without Haas, just didn't have it in the Sweet 16 against Texas Tech, and now they're going to lose Haas, Dakota Mathias, and Vincent Edwards to graduation. But really, you can make a very clear argument that it's the best team under Matt Painter, first Elite Eight in his 13th season. And then West Virginia, they're always there. Bob Huggins has 5 guys that are just chewing on rocks out there playing defense. But letting up 90 points, not what you would have expected, so they go home earlier than they wanted to.
And you feel bad for a guy like Javon Carter because, I mean, he's been in West Virginia since, the 80s. But, his hairline makes him look like he's been there for a while. He played with Jerry West, I'm sure. But, it's you got to give credit to West Virginia, and they've been one of those teams that's kind of been surprisingly underappreciated, I think, this year. Last year they got a lot more attention for how well they played defense, and this year they didn't get the same amount of notoriety for it, mainly because Trae Young kind of owned them the first time that he played them earlier this year. But give a lot of credit to them, and best of luck to Javon. Defense doesn't really translate well to the NBA, but Javon Carter's that kind of talent.
And you just mentioned your favorite basketball player, Trae Young, and the Oklahoma Sooners. So we're going to move right on to the Midwest region. You had said Oklahoma was the team that Lee should have been in. I said it was Syracuse, who were both in the same region. And, of course, Oklahoma lost in the first round, and Syracuse got to the Sweet 16. So I look dumb, you look smart. But Kansas outlasts Duke 85-81 in overtime, the best regional final by a mile, and a ridiculous game from the Mississippi State transfer Malik Newman. 32 points, 11 of 12 from the free throw line, and all 13 points for the Jayhawks in overtime. And most importantly, Duke lost, so the world can continue. It's
great day in America, as always. Whenever Duke loses, it's a great day in America. And when it's their last game of the year and they lose, it's an even better day. So, but I mean, Malik Newman, you mentioned all 13 points in the second half that Kansas even had. Like the game was 72-72 going into overtime, and Malik Newman scored 13 points and Duke scored 9. Like that's scary.
Insane.
But then, I mean, you mentioned it. The 32 points, 26 of those came after halftime, John. He was 2 of 8 in the locker room, and then all of a sudden something turned on, and he just went nuts in the second half, and he needed it because this is a Kansas team that, I mean, when I look at that box score, John, they should have dominated Duke. They should have absolutely dominated. I think they had something like 17 offensive rebounds and only had 15 second chance points. Like, those are the type of hustle points
I feel
that
like they're
need
still
to be
not that
there.
good a team.
I mean,
I still feel like they're not that good a team.
They're not, and this is the thing. They
should've
lost
multiple
Azubuike.
times.
Yeah, they lost Azubuike with 3 minutes to play in regulation. I mean, you look at some of these names that are scoring guys like LeGerald Vick. Does anybody know who he was prior to last
Michael
night?
Vick's cousin.
Yeah, exactly. Devontae Graham had just 11 points, 6 assists. Svi Mikhailuk, he had a big three, obviously, and he's been a big-time three-point shooter for them this year. But, I mean, this was the Malik Newman show. And what's amazing is the fact that he did this against Wendell Carter Jr., Marvin Bagley, Grayson Allen, all of these guys, Trayvon Duval, who just did not play well down the stretch, even though he had 20 points leading the way for Duke. But, I mean, this was an incredible game. This was quite possibly the game of the entire tournament.
And actually, it was funny because Duval and Newman sort of switched places. In the first half, Duval couldn't miss. I mean, he was on fire, playing real well. And Newman couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if he was standing right next to it. And then second half switched completely. Duval did nothing. Newman was unstoppable. And look, another great Duke team that didn't get as far as they wanted. Grayson Allen, that shot at the buzzer, still cannot believe it didn't go in. I mean, it went around and around and around the cylinder before it came out. I guess that's some payback for the Gordon Hayward shot way back when. But Duke's going to lose Bagley, Carter, and Allen at the minimum. But don't worry, everyone, because they've got the top 3 recruits coming in next year. Cam Reddish, Zion Williamson, and the third name is escaping me right now. But, I mean, they're going to be ridiculous. They're going to be the preseason number 1 in every single poll, and they'll probably win every game by 40, and hopefully they'll lose in the championship game or something.
We can only hope. All we know is that now Duke goes into the offseason and we get to keep talking about basketball without having to worry about them. So, yay.
Beautiful.
There we go.
Amazing.
Last region to talk about here out west, and this was a team, John, that, I mean, we talked about them a little bit when we broke down the brackets a couple weeks ago, that had the Big Ten tournament not been the week before it normally is and should always be for whatever godforsaken reason, Michigan was probably the team playing the best basketball out of anybody heading into March Madness. And right now, 13-game win streak, and they're going to head into the Final Four to take on the Cinderella Loyola-Chicago.
Yeah, Michigan's playing great. By the way, the other recruit I forgot was, R.J. Barrett. He's the number 1 recruit, actually. Zion Williamson's 2, Reddish is 3. Gotta hate Duke. Yeah, whatever. They're the worst. Anyway, moving back to the West. Michigan, we both picked them. Yay for us. 8th Final Four in program history. Really good game against Florida State. Nearly getting to San Antonio themselves as the 9 seed. And then, of course, the question on everybody's mind, it's been keeping Dana Jacobson up for days. Why did Florida State not foul? Why did they not foul? I mean, Sister Jean was saying at Loyola-Chicago, why did Florida State not foul? Leonard Hamilton's children are screaming at him in the middle of the night, Dad, why did you not foul? And Hamilton acted like, she spoke to him in Swahili or something, because he was just incredulous to the question. But I actually kind of understood his thought process. This didn't bother me nearly as much as it seemed to bother every other human being on the planet.
Same.
The game was over. I'm tired of these end of games taking 9,000 hours because there's 150 free throws. We got a foul every, 0.1 seconds.
Yep.
I got to go to sleep a little earlier. Florida State lost. Michigan won. Let's move on. I don't care. I just don't care. I understand why people think he should have fouled, but to me it was overblown. The chances of them winning were slim to none. I know you're supposed to play till the final whistle, blah, 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 blah. If they were, down by 2, I get it. If they were down by 3, I get it. If that three-pointer that they shot had gone in, I get it. None of that happened. The game was over. Let it be.
Yeah, well, I mean, and here's the thing, John. I mean, I look at this, and they were down 3 with 1:17 to go. P.J. Savoy hits a 3, and it's 55-52. So 1:17, you're trying to you can get at least one more defensive stop in there, right?
Sure.
So they foul 11 seconds into it. 11 seconds later, missed free throw, defensive rebound, missed three-pointer, defensive rebound. Then Michigan goes 1 of 2 at the line. They're up 4 with 40 seconds to go. And then here's where it gets really bad for Florida State. Final 40 seconds, right? Final 40 seconds, they're down 4. Missed three-pointer, offensive rebounder. Missed three-pointer, offensive rebound. 2-point tip-in, and then an immediate foul, which they hit both free throws. Like, at that point, it's a struggle. Then you miss another three. Like, they missed 4 3-pointers in the final 40 seconds. That's not exactly a way to try to extend the game more than anything else. And this is what bothers me about the idea to foul or not. It's fine if you're going to foul, if you're not taking stupid shots that you don't need at that moment. The idea of fouling to extend the game is that you get a quick 2 and then foul and hope that they miss a free throw, not chuck up threes and try to get offensive rebounds.
But that's the thing. For anybody that thinks that college basketball is better than the NBA, now, I like college basketball more, but it's not a better game of basketball. It's just not. I mean, the end of games in college are painful to watch because despite the best efforts of all these coaches, some of these kids are still just dumb as bricks. I mean, chucking up these threes, not driving to the lane, not getting fouled. I mean, Florida State didn't deserve to win that game as good as they played at the end. It was a mess, and there you go. But Michigan, the best team John Beilein has had, great defensively, make the big plays when they need them. They're going to be a really tough matchup for Loyola-Chicago in the Final Four. We're going to break these matchups down in our final segment. But, Florida State only shoots 31% from the field. And as athletic as Florida State is, they just did not have the horses at the end to make the big shots when they needed them. And Michigan goes on to San Antonio.
So it's Michigan, Loyola-Chicago, Villanova, and Kansas heading to the Final Four. We'll break that down in a little bit because otherwise you might not listen to the rest of the show. So it's called a tease, folks. We're teaching you about the business of radio. So we certainly expect you to stick around later on. When we come back, though, we're going to graduate to the pros. NBA playoffs just around the corner, but some big-time injuries could really be hurting some of the favorites heading into the playoffs. Coming up in the Cheap Seats.
This is Katie, co-host of Coffee with Keith and Katie here on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Coffee with Keith and Katie, where we talk about the adventures of our daily lives and relationship. A new show comes out every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Guess who's back? Back again. Shady's back. Tell a friend. Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back?
Back in the Cheap Seats, Christian Heimall once again here with you along with John Lauder after a week hiatus for me and John running the show solo last week, but we're back in action together, 1 and 2, as we get sent here to break down some of the NBA's playoff races. And normally, John, I mean, we got, like a week and a half left in the regular season, something like that?
Basically 8 to 10 games for every team.
So, and as much fun as playoff races, when we talk about that, it's like who's going to get in, who's going to get that final wild card spot or whatever it is, or if there's a division race. But the nice part about the NBA is that nobody cares who wins the Atlantic Division. Nobody cares who the 8 seed is in the Eastern Conference, because the 8 seed in the Eastern Conference is like, the G League in the West. So it really doesn't matter. So what we're going to talk about instead is the fact that 2 teams who are favorites in their conferences, the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics, are dealing with some pretty big injuries to some of their star players heading into the postseason, is Kyrie Irving and Seth Curry 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's insane. So Steph Curry's not going to play in the first round. Steve Kerr came out and said that. And who knows how long Irving's going to be out. They said that Irving's surgery was minimally invasive, which is sort of code for, oh, crap, he could be out a while. And then, look, Curry not playing in the first round, not a big deal. You put Steve Kerr out there, a point with the rest of the team, and they'll be just fine. But if I'm Houston, if I'm Cleveland, if I'm Toronto, I'm thrilled with this, because any chance that Boston and especially Golden State is not 100% makes my chances to win the title that much more.
Yep.
So LeBron must be thrilled about this. James Harden must be thrilled about this. Mike D'Antoni must be thrilled about this as he's eating his mozzarella and his salami and all the other stuff. But the bigger issues for Boston, I mean, nothing, against Steph Curry, one of the 5 best players in the league, but you've got Durant.
The other 4 best players are on his team. Like 3 of the other 4 are on his
exactly,
team, so,
exactly.
No big deal.
Right. You've got Durant. You've got Draymond Green. You have Klay Thompson. With Kyrie Irving, there's no Gordon Hayward, it's really a precipitous drop after that. There's a lot of good players, but there's no superstars. So if Boston is without Irving for a while, and it's going to be 3 to 6 weeks, you're
literally
going into
now
the beginning
putting
of the playoffs and possibly longer.
You're putting your playoff hopes on Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Al Horford.
Correct.
If you're the Boston Celtics, and that's a very scary thing, considering this team should have been, Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, Al Horford,
and then the rest of those guys.
Whoever, and then pick whoever you want. But you're absolutely right, because this is scary. Because now, that being said, the reason why it's concerning to me if I'm Golden State is because for the first time in the Warriors era, in these last 5 years, there's a legitimate threat to the crown in the West, and that is the Houston Rockets. I mean, this is a team that, as we get set here, is 6 games better than Golden State in the win column. They've won 9 in a row. They're playing incredible defense as well. And D'Antoni,
they've set the team record for wins already.
Team
with 60.
record for wins, and not only that, but they're doing it on the road as well. They're 30-8 on the road, John. This is a team that is insane. You imagine. This is Mike D'Antoni, right? This is the same guy who coached the New York Knicks a couple of years ago. This is the same guy, it's unbelievable that it took Chris Paul and James Harden, 2 ball hogs, to work in an offense that is designed to share the basketball, that is actually winning games and dominating games as well. So if I'm Golden State, I am very nervous. Obviously, if you're Boston, you're nervous too. But you knew once Gordon Hayward went down 6 minutes into the season, you knew that your chances were that much worse. So I'd be more concerned if I'm Golden State if Steph Curry can't come back, even though you do have those other pieces there available to you.
Sure. It's going to be weird to see how these playoffs shake out because despite how good Houston's been, I just can't see Golden State not making the finals. I would be stunned. I know that Houston's 60-14. We've talked about the numbers. We've gone over them multiple times already on this show. I just can't see Golden State not making the finals. They're just so deep, so talented. Curry is going to come back. Unless they all just start, breaking their legs.
Yeah, but I mean, and listen, you still have to beat them 4 times. That's the thing.
Right.
This isn't the NFL where it's
in 7 games.
Yeah, you got to beat them 4 times in 7 games, and that's very difficult to do. Which is why I think a lot of people still give Cleveland the advantage in the East, even though they're nowhere near being the best team. They still have the best player on the planet in LeBron James, and you got to beat him 4 times in 7 games. So it's one of those really weird situations where, I agree with you. I don't see anybody other than Golden State come out of the West, but at the same time, Houston is playing like that team where it's just kind of hard not to bet on them. I go back to we were just breaking down college basketball. I can't not now looking at it, I can't not pick Villanova because they were just that good as a team, that playing that well at that particular time. Even though I felt so many other teams were a better team, Houston, even though I think Golden State is a better team, they're just playing so much better right now.
Talking NBA here inside the Cheap Seats, John Lauder, Christian Heimall with you. A reminder, listen, like, review, iTunes, Spreaker, Google Play, yada yada, on and on and on. Make sure you go to thephmedia.com, check out all the great shows. There's the Drinking Coffee with the Katie and the Keith. There's the movies. Baxter does the verse of the day. There's so much stuff. You should quit your job and just listen to all the shows. Go to our Facebook page, like the page, and then answer the daily poll question. There's only one correct answer. I'll give that to you at the end of the show. Would you rather have Final Four tickets or World Series tickets? Here's a hint. One's not baseball. Back to the NBA. Cavs surging at the right time.
This is why we can't give you cue cards, because you just don't. You ignore them anyway. There's a whole script written for you, and you just ignore it completely. You don't care.
I don't care. I don't care about scripts. Okay, I'm the Michael Scott of Public House Media. So anyway, Cavs. Oh God, I was getting into a flow, and then he just had to punch me right in the face. Cavs surging at the right time. Ty Lue away from the team, and I feel bad because he has some sort of illness going on, but clearly the team doesn't need him because they're killing it right now. Because it's all about LeBron. It's been about LeBron since he got into the league. Quite frankly, forget about a coach, forget about everything. Let LeBron drive the bus, make the meals, and they're good. Playing at the top of his game, he'd be the MVP if not for Harden. And I don't think they can beat the Rockets.
He'd be the MVP if we weren't tired of him.
Yeah.
He'd be the NBA. He'd be the MVP every. It's the same reason Jordan wasn't the MVP every single year. But
it gets boring.
Listen, as much as and I understand what it's. Who's the assistant now in Cleveland? I can't even remember his name at the moment. Yeah, exactly.
But, Larry Drew.
Larry Drew, correct. Yeah, Larry Drew.
Former Bucks head coach.
So, I mean, he's saying that the team's rallying around, the fact that Tyronn Lue's not there. Here's all due respect. Listen, all due respect to Coach Lue, and I hope he gets better. But are we forgetting the fact that Kevin Love just came back and he's healthy? Yeah. And when you've got Kevin Love and Kyle Korver and LeBron James and like 3 other really good shooters, you can basically play 5 out. And in the NBA today, 5 out is like, just give up and go home type deal. Like, I mean, that's kind of what you've got 5 pretty talented shooters, and all you got to do is just set screens. I mean, if you watch what the Cavaliers did to Brooklyn the other night, I mean, granted, it's Brooklyn, I know, but they're literally just it's Korver and Love setting screens for each other, open threes nonstop, or a quick easy drive for LeBron to the basket. So this is a team that is getting better at the right time, and they're not even fully healthy. That's what's scary. This is a Cavaliers team that's peaking at the right time, and they're not even fully healthy. Imagine what happens when like Larry Nance Jr. and Rodney Hill all come back from injury and just absolutely start rolling people. I mean, this is going to be a scary thing, considering especially how well the Cavs played in Toronto the other night.
Right, and Toronto always folds in the playoffs. We'll see if that changes this time around. LeBron James, 3rd player in NBA history to have 10 or more seasons in a row of 2,000 points. Karl Malone with 12, Michael Jordan with 11. LeBron's really good at basketball. We all know that. But again, I don't care about the regular season. It's about the playoffs. If they can deliver in June and July, that's really what matters in the NBA. We're going to move right along. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and Christian's going to talk for like 20 straight minutes because it's Major League Baseball preview. I'm going to give you like 4 words, and he's going to fill the rest. But you're listening to the Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. We've broken down college basketball, the pros, little baseball coming up next.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we hang out and just talk movie and TV news and reviews, and it's awesome. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Cinema Stories. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
And we're back here inside the Cheap Seats. John Lauder and Christian Heimall with you. 2 segments down, 2 left to play with on this Monday, March 26th. A reminder to follow us on Twitter, especially Christian, because you're going to want to get all of his Red Sox tweets that are going to start in earnest.
Boy.
Actually, what's going to happen is you're going to follow him. Then he's going to tweet so much you're going to stop following him. But anyway.
Yep, pretty much.
at
I
Chris
gained
Heimall,
7 followers last week when I was on vacation and didn't tweet once. I gained followers.
We'll see. That should be a hint to you. At Chris Heimall, ChrisHeimall. You can follow me on Twitter. I'll basically just retweet people, but the retweets will be worth your time. At John_Lauder, JON_LAUDER. Major League Baseball is upon us. I believe it starts Thursday. If I'm not mistaken. Season just a few days away. Now, we all know I'm not the biggest baseball guy, but look, I care about all sports, and I have been watching and listening and dissecting a little bit. Plenty of intrigue for the new year. Will the Yankees ever lose?
They might.
No.
They might.
Will the Mets pitching staff stay healthy? They
Nope.
won't. Is the Giants' season already over with the Madison Bumgarner injury? Yes. Will Shohei Ohtani start the year in AAA?
He's to me the most interesting storyline to come out of spring training that like it gets talked about randomly. Like there really is such a thing as East Coast bias, especially when it comes to baseball. Because everything on the West Coast is almost ignored, and you've got the best player in the game in Mike Trout out there. You've got the best pitcher, arguably, in the history of the game in Clayton Kershaw out there. You've got Shohei Ohtani, who might actually be Babe Ruth. Who knows? Just reincarnated with some sushi. Like, I don't understand what's going on out there on the West Coast, and it doesn't really get talked about. We care more about, Judge and Stanton, rightfully so, and Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, great, but like, oh my God, there's so much good baseball talent out on the West Coast, and Ohtani's really interesting to me just because he's done so well this spring training. Like the spring for him, the guy's throwing 98, and then he's also hitting homers at 23 years old. Like, it's unbelievable to see what this kid can do, and I think he'll start the season in AAA just because they've invested so much money, the Angels have, into him. You can't bring him up in his first major league game, he goes 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. You can't have that happen. You need to get him a little bit more used to seeing it. He's an incredible talent, but let's get this straight right now. He's not Ichiro Suzuki. He's not Hideki Matsui, where he's just going to show up and start dominating people for the first 5 years of his career. It's just not going to happen. So he's just so much fun to watch, and I think he will be brought up by the end of April, but I don't think he's going to be there at the start of the season.
And it's interesting that you talk about him with the home runs and the 98 miles per hour, because a lot of the stuff I've been reading is that, people aren't that impressed because the spring numbers have been, at least pitching sort of a hot pile of garbage. Now, on the one hand, you really can never read too much into spring stats. Obviously, we all know that. But on the flip side, is it a little much right now? And is AAA the right decision to give him some time to maybe get him, to get his confidence up playing against, AAA players, get a couple of solid starts under his belt, get, 40, 50 at-bats down there, and then get him up in April, like you mentioned. Maybe that's the right way to go about it. On the flip side, he's the biggest splash the Angels have had in a long time. Right. So you can't keep him down there forever. The fans are going to want to see him. There's going to be pressure from ownership because they, doled out not a ton of money, but if they want to keep him down the line, it's going to be a ton of money, assuming he lives up to the expectations. So people are going to want to see him, so you got to kind of play that song and dance a little bit. Now
here's the issue that I had with the signing of him. So in spring training, he went 3 for 28, which, by the way, if you can't do math, that's a 107 batting average.
That's tremendous.
That's
like Ray Ordonez right there.
Yeah, that's like even I had a better batting average than that. Also, he had 2 starts. He pitched 2 2/3 innings, and he had a 27 ERA. And he gave up 3 homers. So I mean, he didn't have a great spring by the numbers standpoint, but baseball is probably the one sport where preseason numbers mean less than anything else. Where I've always had an issue with him. Kid's 23 years old, impressive stats, but you look at what has really made him impressive is his home run numbers, and his best season was 2016. So we're talking 2 years ago already, where he hit 322, 22 homers in 104 games. 22 home runs in 100 games isn't that impressive when you've got guys who are hitting 30 home runs in 90 games in Major League Baseball. Sure. And then from a pitching standpoint, in 2016, he had a 186 ERA in 21 starts. So, I mean, to me, when I look at his numbers and I watch him, he's a better pitcher than he is a hitter. But this is, again, an Angels team that has been searching for something other than the fact that they have Mike Trout. I mean, you remember how much money they threw at Albert Pujols. Remember when they had guys like C.J. Wilson on their pitching staff. This was a team that was hoping when they signed Josh Hamilton. Oh, my God. They signed Hamilton. They had Pujols. They had Trout. They had everybody. This was supposed to be the team that was going to dominate baseball for years, and they just couldn't get it together. So this is one of the things they needed to do to make a splash. The story will be nice. It'll be interesting to see, though, just which way the Angels lean, and I think it'll eventually end up being he's going to be a pitcher as opposed to a hitter.
And the other question that I had written down, can the Astros repeat?
Listen, I mean, the Astros, it's amazing that there's a defending champ that hasn't been talked about. They got better and nobody talked about them. This is an Astros team that traded for Garrett Cole. They kept every kept every piece intact. They signed Jose Altuve to a 5-year, $151 million extension, which makes his bank account taller than he is, which is taller. Just incredible to think that this is an Astros team that was the best offensive team in baseball a year ago, and it wasn't even close. when you talk about batting average and run production. I'm not talking home runs here, but actual run production. Astros were so dominant last year, and they needed one piece to win the World Series. That was Justin Verlander. They went out and got him. And then they went out and got Garrett Cole, who, if you remember, I think like 6-7 years ago was the number 1 overall pick. Like this is
ridiculous.
It talented. He's been hiding and wasting away in Pittsburgh. And once the Pirates traded Andrew McCutchen, you knew Cole was on the trading block. A lot of people thought the Yankees were going to get him, and I thought that too because I still think the Yankees need one more arm in their rotation. But the fact that the Astros got him is just so scary to think. With this team, I know everybody's talking about the Yankees and whatnot, but I'm telling you right now, and this is not me being a Red Sox homer and hating the Yankees. This is looking at it from a pure baseball standpoint. The Astros are the best team in the American League, the best team in the American League.
Now, in terms of playoff picks, what are you?
Ooh, I like this. I like this stuff. So, this is going to be a lot of interesting stuff for me. So, because you have the wild card stuff. So in the American League, it's going to be the Astros. It's going to be the Astros in the West. It's going to be the Cleveland Indians in the Central, and then just because I don't trust that Red Sox rotation, I really don't. And the Yankees have just gotten better and better, and last year's success is going to help. I think the Yankees win the division in the American League East. That being said, I honestly think it's the same exact playoffs for the American League, except the Yankees and Red Sox switch. So I got the Twins and the Red Sox in the wild card. Minnesota is going to be a starkly improved team this year. I think the Angels are really, really close, and it might come down to, like we had a few years ago where we had a one-game playoff to decide who's going to the one-game wild card, which was hilarious. It's just amazing to think of. And then in the National League, Dodgers, Cubs, Nationals win the division, and then I'll throw this one out for you just for fun. Mets and Brewers get the wild card in the National League. I love Milwaukee, and they've done. Oh my goodness, this was last year a team that should not have been as competitive as they were. They finished 6 games out of the division, and they added bats. They added Christian Yelich. They added some other pieces to their outfield, and then Ryan Braun's going to play first base and just murder people and might win the NL MVP. So I'm too excited, John. You know this. I'm so excited. It's not even fair. Like Thursday's the best because there are 2 Thursdays 2 days that I live for. One is the first 2 days of the NCAA tournament where there's nothing to do except watch basketball for 12 hours. And then there's opening day Major League Baseball. When it falls on a weekday and you got first pitch at 1 o'clock, you literally have like 13 hours of just baseball. It's amazing. Yeah. I love it.
That's true. For me, in the American League, I've got Yankees winning the AL East, Indians the Central, Astros the West. Wild card, I'm also going to go with the Red Sox and the Twins. I would not be surprised if the Red Sox won the AL East and the Yankees were a wild card. They're both going to make it. Then in the NL, I've got the Nationals, Cubs, Dodgers, and then my wild card are the Mets and the Diamondbacks. I know the Diamondbacks have lost some pieces, but I still think they're going to be good enough. Now, would I be surprised to see the Brewers or the Cardinals? Not really. And then for my world, did you give me a World Series?
I did not give a World Series, no.
No, go ahead. Or is it too early for you?
No. I always like being put on record early. Well, considering the Yu Darvish signing, but they lost Jake Arrieta. You know what? I'm gonna give it to them. Because they didn't really lose much. They also didn't add much. But sometimes you add by not subtracting. If that makes any sense to anybody there, I don't think the Astros repeat as much as I want them to, because it would be a great story. I'm going to go Indians-Dodgers World Series, and I think the Dodgers pull it off this year. I think the Dodgers learn from their last 2 years of getting just a little bit further, and falling short. They make a play late at the trade deadline, and they get that one missing piece that they needed last year and didn't get. So I'm going to go Dodgers over Indians in the World Series.
I like that. So I've got the Dodgers and the Astros in the World Series again.
I like that a lot. Oh,
Game
that would
7.
be so much fun.
Game 7. Tie game. Okay. And Clayton Kershaw hits the game-winning home run.
Pitchers who rake. Pitchers who rake. I love it.
But yeah, no, I think the Dodgers are going to do it this time as well. I think they've learned from, I don't even want to say learn from their mistakes. They got to Game 7 of the World Series last year. But I think this is going to be the year for the Dodgers. Dave Roberts, tremendous manager. You've got the best pitcher in baseball. We all know that. I like the Indians pick too, though. It's going to be hard for both of these teams to get back. It's never easy. It's a long season. We all know that. But if I had to pick, I'm going to go with Dodgers and Astros. Real quick, some of the over/under win totals in Vegas are kind of interesting to me. Over/under for the Red Sox is 91.5 for wins.
Okay.
Just going to give a couple of ones that stand out. Astros 96.5.
Over.
And they're tied with I would go over. They're tied with the Dodgers for the most, 96.5.
Over.
New York Mets 81.
Over.
Yeah, I would bet stupid money on that. Yankees 94.5.
I'll take the over.
Yeah, I think I'd take the over there too. Nationals 92.5. Yeah, that one's tough.
I take the under just because.
Yeah. Cubs
but
94.5.
See, then that means that you think the Mets
and the Indians 94.5. That's a lot of teams though with 95+ wins.
Yeah.
It's a lot of teams.
That means there's going to be a lot of bad teams. And listen, there will be a lot, especially in the American League this year. Like the 5 playoff teams that I have making it, the 3 division winners and the 2 wild cards, they are clear and above the upper echelon. And I don't think it's going to even be close. But like the one team that may surprise a lot of people, the team that will have the most improvement from win to loss will be the Baltimore Orioles. That may mean they only have 7 more wins than they did last year, but they will have the most win improvement from year to year.
I like that. All right, so we're going to wrap this segment up. We'll talk plenty more baseball next weekend because obviously opening day will have already been upon us. We got one more segment to go. We're going to break down the Final Four, give you a preview, give you our picks. Our brackets were a disaster, but maybe with only 4 teams left, we can make the right decision. We'll also give you our answer to the poll question that you should be checking out on the Cheap Seats Facebook page. Would you rather have World Series tickets or Final Four tickets? And we'll also give you our Mojo Monday coming up here inside the Cheap Seats.
This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good here on Public House Media. I just want to thank you for listening to the following broadcast brought to you by Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope that you'll come check out my show, How to Write Good, the writing show that is not about writing. A new show of How to Write Good comes out every Wednesday, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of How to Write Good. Again, thanks for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
One last bit of business to get to here on this Monday, March 26th. By the way, great day in America because we don't have to talk about Duke basketball anymore. They lost. Yay. Final Four coming up this weekend here in San Antonio. Christian Heimall, John Lauder here with you in the Cheap Seats, which is the only place that we could afford except for the Final Four because, let's be honest, those tickets are worth more than your mortgage. So we'll get to it, though. I mean, we broke down the Elite Eight. We talked about the teams that made it there, and now it's time for us to have our busted bracket, our second chance at actually picking things correctly, even though we did get 50% of the Final Four right. We each had Villanova and Michigan. We also each had Michigan State and Virginia, so, womp there. But, John, I mean, you've got 3 powerhouses. You've got the one team that was a champion just 2 years ago. You've got another that has the longest consecutive conference championship streak in Kansas, a team probably playing the best out of all of them in the country in Michigan, and then, of course, to many, the greatest Cinderella of the NCAA Tournament in Loyola-Chicago. So let's start it off with that first matchup, the Ramblers, first Final Four since, 66, I believe?
63.
63, and then Michigan, a team who, is still, depending on who you ask, 24, 27 years removed from a Final Four appearance, depending on who you ask. So
yes, so they're the first game, 6:09 on TBS. Michigan 6-1 all time in national semifinal games. So they've advanced to the title game 6 straight times. Their only loss was in 1964 against Duke. Luckily, they don't have to worry about that. But that doesn't really bode that well for Loyola-Chicago. However, Ramblers, such a complete team, Christian. And
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I picked Michigan to get to the Final Four, so I clearly like them. The biggest key for me is, can the Ramblers stay tough inside against Michigan's bigs? I think that's, my, excuse the pun, biggest question. When you've got, Mo Wagner inside, they've got, some real talent in the paint, and Loyola's a small team. Other than, Cameron Krutwig down low at 6'9", he's really their only big. So he's going to have to continue to be an excellent passer, and he's also going to have to be effective defensively without picking up fouls. And this is actually going to be a key in the other national semifinal in a minute that we'll talk about. But if he gets in foul trouble early, that's going to allow Wagner and some of those other bigs from Michigan to do some damage inside, and that could be a problem for Loyola-Chicago. But neither of these teams beat themselves.
Right.
So I would expect a close, low-scoring game. And if it is close at the end, neither of these teams are going to be shook. You're not going to see a Florida State situation happening in this game.
Right.
Because both teams have really good point guards, excellent coaches, and they're incredibly well prepared.
There's so much talk in college basketball nowadays about guard play, and there's a team in the other semifinal that has tremendous, legendary status guard play. But to me, it still always is, if you have that great interior presence, that is another level, another added check mark on your side of things when it comes down to the tail of the tape, so to speak. So, I think Michigan has that over Loyola-Chicago. Now, that being said, there's experience and there's big game experience. And for both of these two teams, their big game experience is somewhat limited. Just in John Beilein obviously has the big game coaching experience. But when you look at this Loyola-Chicago team, you got to kind of take into effect momentum here. I mean, you got 3 buzzer beaters from 3 different guys, and then a dominant effort over Kansas State in the Elite Eight. If they can keep riding that momentum, who knows? But, I mean, as far as I can tell right now, just from a pure basketball standpoint, this should be a game that Michigan wins. Whether they do or not, we'll find out.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, I'm obviously going to be rooting for the Ramblers. My heart picks them, but the brain picks Michigan.
Exactly.
They've been so good since the Big Ten tournament. I think they've won something like 15 games in a row, something like that. But look, Loyola-Chicago's won a ton of games in a row as well. Can Clayton Custer and Marcus Towns create easy opportunities for the rest of their teammates? They've been doing it all tournament long. Towns, the local product, went to St. Joe's Metuchen in New Jersey. FDU transfer, called some of his games at FDU. They've both been so good at creating off the dribble and also hitting shots from the outside. But like we've talked about, this is the best defensive team that the Wolverines have had under John Beilein, and that's why I think they're probably going to win. Let's move over to Kansas and Villanova now, the only 2 1 seeds left. To be quite frank, Christian, I would be stunned if Kansas beat Villanova. I still can't believe they beat Duke. Because, again, I don't think they're that good. And that, and look, I hate saying this because I don't really think Bill Self is that great a coach. Tremendous kudos this season. This is by far his worst team, and he's in the Final Four. Let me rephrase. It's the worst team he's taken, to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, the Final Four. He's had worse teams, and they've gone nowhere. But, the biggest issue for Kansas against Duke was Azubuike and D'Souza really their only 2 bigs, so I thought that was going to be a huge problem. And it ended up not being an issue at all. They did okay. Now, Villanova really doesn't have the bigs other than Spellman, so that won't be a huge problem. But I think the pace could be an issue for Kansas. Kansas is a team that likes to get up and down the floor, and that's what they were able to do against Duke, who's a team that likes to play slow. Nova, on the other hand, they can do it either way. They can grind it out and play slow, or they can play really fast, dunk all over you, and shoot 100 threes. So if the Jayhawks play to their pace, Duke didn't like it, but I think Villanova will, and that's why I believe they're going to have a problem.
Yeah, and the thing with Villanova is, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, is they play very well in that transition style. Again, tremendous guard play. This is a team that plays 4 out. They have guys who can jump the passing lane, and they turn it into a 3-on-1 real quick. They can turn your 3-pointer into a 4-point play. It's really, and do it in lightning speed. Jalen Brunson, 19 points, 5 assists a game, shoots over 50% from the floor. The kid's unbelievable, and he holds on to the basketball. Meanwhile, Devontae Graham, and you even saw it a little bit in that Duke game, John, especially in overtime, struggled a little bit with holding on to the basketball. And Kansas has a young team that will be prone to turnovers, and that is not something you can do against Villanova. What I will say for Kansas, though, is that they played in what was a surprisingly difficult Big 12 this year. I mean, West Virginia, Kansas State was even pretty solid. Texas Tech, despite what I've said about Oklahoma at the start of the year, at the end of the year, Oklahoma State. I mean, this was a very surprisingly difficult Big 12, and those type of things in winning the Big 12 tournament helps this Kansas team get there. So, I mean, this is going to be a great game. I think in situations like this, it does actually come down to coaching. And as weird as it may sound, because of how he's synonymous with Kansas right now at this point, I trust Jay Wright more than I do Bill Self.
Me too.
Just because of recent years. So as much as this game is going to, I think, be decided by which point guard makes the fewest mistakes, Brunson or Graham, I think it ultimately depends on which coach makes the fewest mistakes in Wright or Self, and I'll take Jay Wright, in that sense. So for me, looking at it again, I mean, the two teams that I originally picked to the Final Four, the ones that remain from my original Final Four, are the ones that I'm going to send into the championship game, and I'll take. I mean, we'll touch on it if it gets there, but I'll just say it now. I'll take Villanova over Michigan in the final.
Yeah, we're going to, do a nice big preview of the title game next week. So, of course, Christian and I are both picking Villanova and Michigan, which means it'll be Loyola-Chicago and Kansas
exactly.
In the championship game. So, bet big money on both of those. Real quick before we get out of here, let's give you our answers to the poll question. World Series tickets, Final Four tickets. I mean, to me, you got to pay me to go to a baseball game.
So now here's the thing. Here's the issue. Now, if we're talking it's your team, then to me it's no-brainer World Series. I will take every Red Sox World Series ticket possible as opposed to a Louisville Final Four trip. That being said, if it's just regular tickets, I would probably say Final Four. If it's just like, if my team's not in it. If my team is not in it, I'm going Final Four. But if my team's in it, I'm taking the World Series every single day. Because here's the reason for me. The Final Four is a neutral site. The World Series is not. So, I mean, for me, I've already been to the ballpark. Yay. I mean, yes, it's great. But if it's the Sox, oh, come on, it's no question.
Yeah, well, for me, it's college basketball all day. I don't care who's playing.
If it's Duke in the Final Four, would you rather go watch Duke or would you rather go watch the Braves in the World Series?
Oh, I'd rather go watch Duke because I would root against them and hope they would lose.
All right, fair enough.
And then I hope I could get close enough to spit on Grayson Allen. Anyway. Oh, man. I clearly should have grown up in Chapel Hill.
All right,
but
well,
anyway.
Let's get some good stuff, at least to round out this show here. Our Mojo Monday.
Mojo here.
And we actually both are going positive this week, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so I saw this yesterday on Twitter. A lot of people have been given Johnny Manziel comparisons to Colin Kaepernick in terms of where he stands athletically, where he stands from an actual field standpoint. And I thought what Manziel put out on Twitter was really mature for a guy who has been basically run out of the NFL because of his off-the-field antics, because of his off-the-field issues that he had when he was a member of the Cleveland Browns. And to say some of the things of Colin Kaepernick, and for him to say that what Colin's doing in speaking out for the society and for a race that has been consistently on the wrong end of decisions in this country for centuries is basically admirable. But basically saying that if I'm being compared to Colin Kaepernick because of our play on the field, fine. But don't try to tell me that he's a bad person, because he's not. And I thought that was very mature of Manziel, so I think he's on the upswing. Maybe not to be able to play in the NFL, but to at least be more respected in that sense. He's not Johnny Football anymore. He's turning into Johnny Manziel, which is a big thing for him going forward, not just professionally in the NFL, but personally as well. So I'm giving big kudos to Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, you know what? I can't believe we're saying this. because, it's Johnny Manziel. But I agree. And, he threw in front of some scouts and teams last week and looked pretty good and also said the right things. I still think his NFL career is over, but, hopefully I'm wrong. We'll see what happens. For me, I've got to go with Sister Jean. If you don't know who Sister Jean is, you got to get, up from under your rock like Patrick and SpongeBob and do a little Googling. But Sister Jean is the 98-year-old nun, the mascot for the Loyola-Chicago Ramblers. She had a backwards hat on after the Final Four, the Elite Eight victory against Kansas State, and that's an image that is just incredible. She's getting her own bobblehead. I mean, this woman's a celebrity now, and it's awesome because Loyola-Chicago, and again, this is going to sound cheesy, but I don't care. They are what the NCAA tournament's about. They're why, to me, the NCAA tournament is the best sporting event we have, because despite all the blue bloods, and you're always going to get some number ones and some really good teams in there, the possibility of a Loyola-Chicago, of a VCU, of a George Mason, of a Butler is always there. And that's why you should never fill out brackets, and that's why you got to root for the underdog, because it's fun. And Loyola-Chicago has been amazing. I certainly hope they continue the run. I'd much rather them win the whole thing than me get the prediction right. We'll see what happens. But Sister Jean's my good mojo for this Monday, March 26th.
Absolutely love it. So, again, I mean, a lot of fun stuff. We're really excited for the Final Four coming up this weekend. Championship game is next week. John and I have a full preview of it next week here on the show. But don't forget, we still have two other shows coming up this week. You got Jeff and Max coming up on Wednesday, Baxter and Matt on Friday. Subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com. Share us, review us with all of your friends. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, the Cheap Seats Sports Podcast. Vote on our daily poll question. Would you rather have World Series tickets or Final Four tickets? And don't forget to check out thephmedia.com. Learn about all of our other podcasts here on the Public House Media Network, and check out our store. Go and buy some cool Cheap Seats gear as well. Follow John on Twitter at JON_LAUDER. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Heimall, CHRISHEIMALL. John, it's good to be back, bud.
Love it, man. I can't wait for next Monday. Like Christian said, make sure you check out all the different sites. Make sure you check out the store. Buy mugs, buy shirts, buy so much stuff that they can't fulfill the orders. Do it.
And then John and I have to deliver them to you. So that could be fun.
Yes, we will hand deliver.
You have to pay the flight ticket, but we'll bring it there at least.
That's right. If you provide the ticket, I'll go anywhere to hand deliver a coffee cup with my face on it.
Well, we'll hopefully make that all happen. thephmedia.com. He's John. I'm Chris. We'll see you guys next week in the Cheap Seats.